Can you remind me if you'll be so kind? Staring out into space, asking God to hear my case. Trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? With purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hello and welcome to Alzheimer's Speaks Radio. I'm Lori LeBay, and I'm the host and founder of Alzheimer's Speaks. Glad to have you with us today. For those of you that are new, I just want to tell you a little bit about who Alzheimer's Speaks is and what we're about. Bottom line is we're an advocacy-based company providing multiple platforms to shift our dementia care culture from crisis to comfort around the world. And we do that by joining forces and sharing knowledge and just having these everyday conversations about life with dementia so that we can help raise the knowledge bar and decrease that fear and stigma bar and allow people to really live healthy, purpose-filled lives. And we know that we're making a difference thanks to all of you and your likes and your clicks and your shares with your Facebook friends, your LinkedIn colleagues, your Twitter tribes, your Pinterest pals. Sharing Alzheimer's Speaks information has just been amazing. Through your shares, we actually got acknowledged as being the #1 influencer online regarding Alzheimer's, according to ShareCare and Dr. Oz. And again, I can't thank you enough for that. All of us have friends and family and colleagues and acquaintances that are dealing with this that we don't even know a lot of times are dealing with this because they're not ready to talk about it yet. And I'm a firm believer that the more we can push information out, the easier it's going to be for people to grab it when they need it. And I'm talking as a daughter who lived this journey with her own mom with dementia for 30 years. It can be a really isolating process. So would encourage you all to continue to share those clicks as you're listening and spread the word that we're here. On Alzheimer's Speaks Radio, we like to get everyone's voice heard. So we often interview people who have dementia. We interview families who have dealt with it or are dealing with it. We have anything from researchers to movie directors, singer-songwriters, authors, people who have created a business. It might be technology, maybe it's housing. Anything that will help those living with this disease live a little better. I also want to give a shout out just to Nancy Reagan. You know, the former First Lady recently died, and she just had such a big impact on this disease. You know, she was a fierce protector of Ronald Reagan, our president, and but she also raised the bar of his battle and the disease as a whole. I also want to just praise Harry Urban, who lives out in Pennsylvania in Lancaster County. He was just highlighted in a beautiful article titled "Lancaster County Man with Dementia Finds Life Doesn't Have to Be Perfect to Be Wonderful." And as usual, Harry just gives some really significant tips that are really simple to implement into your own life. Harry is one of our experts on Dementia Chats webinars that we do twice a month. In fact, we just had one this morning that was a great conversation about the difference between dementia villages and dementia-friendly communities. And I'll be posting that probably tomorrow for people to go ahead and watch. All of our webinars are free, and we do those the second and fourth Tuesday of the month. Here in Minnesota, I just kind of want to yell out to HealthStar Home Health. They do just an amazing job delivering services to those in need and helping educate and do some cutting-edge things along the line. They're not afraid to try something new. And so I love working with them. a lot. I also want to let you know that the show here is on 11 social networks, and it's brought to you by Audible.com. And you can actually get a free Audible download and a 30-day trial by just going to www.audibletrial.com/social. And there's over 180,000 titles to choose from that you can download onto your iPhone or Android or Kindle or MP3. So go ahead and check out audible.com. Another sponsor here of the show is FreshBooks. And FreshBooks is just a friend of ours because they help save time, and none of us have enough time. Not only do they help with simple solutions of invoicing if you're in business, but just managing expenses and staying on top of who owes you and what you owe them is a great way to be able to move forward with a little less anxiety. And we all know that tax season is upon us. So you can also go to FreshBooks and get a free 30-day trial there by going to gofreshbooks.com/live. That's gofreshbooks.com/alive. Well, let's get started with the show today because this hour is just going to blast by. I am so excited to have Jo Huey with us, and she's a specialist in helping caregivers, both family, friends, and those that are paid to care, work through the maze of emotions and skills that are needed to assist somebody with Alzheimer's or another related form of the disease. She shares lessons learned from her experience in multiple care settings, including nursing homes, assisted livings, home health, and companion care companies from 1985 through the hurricane of Katrina, with the evacuation process in August of 25. And since 2006, Jo has had the opportunity to travel to 30 states to present her Alzheimer's educational materials at conferences. She's best known for her communication tool, the 10 Absolutes. And I have to say, I have seen this around so many times, Jo, and I'm saddened to say that a lot of times your name isn't attached to it. But people are pushing this out constantly, and I just think it's fabulous. So I'm glad that we're able to connect the dots as to whose tool this is. Jo is also the author of 2 books, Alzheimer's Disease, Help and Hope, and Don't Leave Mama Home with the Dog. So welcome, Jo.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I'm very excited to talk to you because I think your 10 Absolutes are absolutely fabulous and can be life-changing for people who are not only dealing with somebody with dementia, but a lot of other areas in our life as well. Just learning to almost be user-friendly in terms of people and personalities. Can you tell us first, though, Jo, have you been personally touched by dementia, maybe with a family member or close friend?
Oh, absolutely. My real story, which is in my Alzheimer's Disease, Help and Hope, is about my best friend when I was a little bitty girl as a toddler on up, who, and it's way back in what I call the olden days, and I didn't even know anything about Alzheimer's, nor did they. And so ultimately, we believe in retrospect that this best friend, who was an elderly person, probably 50, which doesn't seem so old anymore, but it did when I was a toddler, probably had early onset Alzheimer's disease, and then it was complicated by vascular dementia with some strokes that actually ended his life. So that's what got me interested in it. And I vowed on his deathbed someday I'd find out what it was, and I was going to do something about it because it so affected our lives in some really difficult ways. But little did I know that I was actually being prepped professionally, because I started working in the Alzheimer's arena in 1985. Ultimately, my own mother ended up with vascular dementia, and she lived with me full-time for 3 years and was in the Hurricane Katrina evacuation. And then she lived 2 more years, and I became a distance caregiver for her. And my book, Don't Leave Mama Home with the Dog, is the story of my mom and I. So, and how I was the professional who taught people how to interact, and then when it became my own, it was a whole new ball game. So touched in many aspects, and feel like that is something that I'm able to really share with people in a lot of different ways beyond what I learned and developed, but in that when it hits your own heart and your own home.
It's kind of amazing how similar our stories are. I had a great aunt who was senile. That was the term used back when I was 13. And I was crushed the day she didn't know me. And I kind of had that same epiphany you did, that I don't want anyone feeling this pain. And little do you know how the dots in your life are connected until you really look back. And then it just is such a natural path to end up where you are. My mom, too, had dementia. Her mom had dementia, though we didn't know that as children. That was pretty well hidden. We just thought she had cancer. So kind of interesting how similar our paths really are. You've gotten your books out of you. I'm still working on that. I've got several in me. One I'm working on that I'm hoping to get out yet this year. But I thank you for your work and, for doing all you've done, going back to 85. I mean, you were way ahead of the curve, because most people are just this is just starting to come into, their lives and their mindsets at this time. It was kind of almost a hidden disease, one that was kind of poo-pooed and people shied away from it.
Very much so, very hidden, and still in many ways today, it really, there is still a stigma attached. And, thank you for talking about Nancy Reagan. I had the opportunity to know Maureen Reagan, who was Ronald Reagan's oldest daughter from his first marriage, and she worked with the Alzheimer's Association, and that's where I worked with her on a national level for quite a few years. And you may or may not know that she died of melanoma, which is the bad form of skin cancer. In her, I believe she was only in her 50s. She was just a little older than I, and she died quite a while ago. So she was also an inspiration and someone that I love to give credit to, because she talked about, how it impacted her life, and she gave so much. But even with the President of the United States having, said out loud that he had Alzheimer's disease, which happened on Time magazine in 1995, we still, with that many years, we still have a lot of stigma attached. And I felt that own stigma. I didn't even want to tell my brother and sister when I had Mom tested and really realized that she had vascular dementia. And we had a lot of elders in my family, and we had none of that historically. So I didn't think that was something I was going to deal with on a personal level. But stigma comes from inside and outside, even if you have a lot of experience and a lot of knowledge. So I think that's something we still really have to work on a lot.
I agree. I want to get into your 10 absolutes, because I think most people who are going to look at them, especially family caregivers, are just going to cringe and go, oh my gosh, I am doing everything wrong with them. So can you explain how you came up with the 10 absolutes and exactly what are they? It's a
real fun story how I came up with them. So I had been working with people with Alzheimer's and related disorders for a long time, as I said before, and I'd segued over from health and hospitals into long-term care so that I could work with people more. And I got the opportunity, and it was a grant, once again, back to the Alzheimer's Association, and this was in Colorado at the time, way back in the early 80s. So I think they were started in 1981 in Colorado, and I worked for them as a respite care provider. And one of the little ladies that I went in for respite care, her daughter talked to me, and she knew I wanted to get more education and more background. So she talked me into moving this little lady into my own house with me, and she lived with me for 3 years. And until her death. And so her family had to move to another state, couldn't take her along, and they hired me to take care of her 12 hours a day, 7 days a week, and then my responsibility was to find someone to take care of her in my home the other 12, 7, 365 for right at 3 years. And so she was still, in all the years that I've dealt with, and she was in the early days, in the mid-'80s, she was one of the most difficult people I've ever dealt with. And so I would write this little list of things for people not to do, and I'd say, and don't argue and don't reason and all the things that I would have on that left side of my 10 absolutes, and she would just cause so many problems with the caregivers that came in on those 12 hours. And so she would just cause things, and I would come in the door and they'd leave. They'd say, I don't even care if I pay you. I'm not coming back tomorrow. I can't do this. And so one of the ladies that was just a gem that worked for me and stayed 2 of those 3 years, she said, why don't you tell us what to do instead? We already know what not to do. And so that's when the difficulty became. So all these little things I'd been putting on the side, I had to come over and say, well, don't argue with her and what you need to do instead. And it was self-serving. It was for my own success. And that is actually how the 10 absolutes were born, is writing these little notes and making them concise so that I could keep people, so that I only had her the 12 night hours and the 12 day hours. I could go to school and work and learn more about Alzheimer's. So I had my own little laboratory, per se, and that's how it was developed. So it was developed for usefulness, and that's why it's so important that somebody not feel guilty about this. This is a tool. Many people called it Jo's rules. Well, rules were made to be broken, and I want you to think of that. That's why I'm saying it. But the tool, if you've got a tool, you can't blame yourself if you don't know how to use it till you know how to use it. So if what you're doing works and it's the opposite of this, if it's not broke, don't fix it. But if you're having some difficulty in some areas, then this gives you an idea of what to do if things are going wrong. And so people always tell me, for example, well, I would never argue with them, but then right away in the conversation they'll say something like, but sometimes they say some things that really aren't correct and I need to correct them. So I'm saying, no, you don't need to listen like we all do and kind of go along. And then you can find a way that you can agree on some things. So there are 2 things that I talk about in the Never Argue, Always Agree. But your question was, how did these get developed and how do you keep from feeling guilty? And I think I answered that. And so I'll let you ask some more questions so we're not just hearing from me, and I can expand on some of these.
Okay. Well, one of the things that, and we'll get into, what are these 10 things during our conversation here. But one of the things that so often I think a loved one can get so upset and they want to argue and they want to know exactly, what somebody is doing and why they're doing it. And yet they can be really, it can be really upsetting, our approaches that we take in terms of correcting. So it was interesting when you said, well, no, I'm not arguing, I'm correcting, and we think that that's a softer tone, but bottom line is it's still disagreeing with a person with dementia. And instead of arguing or correcting or disagreeing, whatever term you want to use, what do you suggest instead?
Well, so when somebody says something, and I'll give you 2 prime examples that I think we all run into one time or another. So the classic, the one that's even a chapter in everybody's book, including mine, is when they say, I want to go. And that's very early on. Or as time goes on, they want to go home. So for a spouse, it can be somebody that has lived in their house together for 35 years, and here they are in the middle of the night saying, I want to go, and sometimes it's to the bank because it's midnight, or I want to go home. They're actually saying, I want to go home. Well, what that tells us is the majority of what is left in the memory part of their brain is in a previous place in time, probably 35 years previous. And that'll answer a lot of other questions that I'll come into. But for this very specific thing, when they say, I want to go home, the classic answer for a spouse would be, home? What do you mean home? This is your home. We've lived here for 35 years. All which is truth. Well, if they knew it was their home, they wouldn't say they wanted to go home. So what we believe they're saying is, I want to go to a different place in time. And so they just mean I'm uncomfortable and I need some reassurance. So when we say this is your home, they don't necessarily get those words, but they get our tone and our attitude that you're wrong and I'm right, and I'm in charge and you're not in charge. Well, if we're uncomfortable and upset, that is not what we want. So what on earth do you say when somebody says, I want to go? And the answer is 3 words, total of 5 letters. I don't think that you need to take notes when you're learning about this stuff, because could you find your notes when you needed it anyway? So I just made it 3 words, 5 easy letters. And the answer when somebody says, I want to go home, which is very true from your heart if you've been around this block or had this happen before, is say, so do I. Because don't you want to go someplace as far away from where you're at right now if you're going to have this disagreement? And so when you say, so do I, in effect, what that does is it really just starts a conversation that's a little different conversation that can be more positive, but it also tells them that we're in this together. And if you can be in anything together rather than be opposed, toe-to-toe, head-to-head, then you can accomplish what you need to accomplish, which is to find something that's a better way. So that's one of the ways that I do never argue, always agree, is you just get on the same page, as people are often heard saying. The other one that happens so often is when they're looking for somebody that has died. This often happens when somebody has died recently, or they may be 95 years old and they're looking for their mama. Once again, it tells us where the majority of the information that's in the storage part of their brain, the hippocampus, is back in a previous place of time. And so we usually say things like, well, they died. Now, they read our body language way better than they read our words, so they know we're upset. And so they're like, he died. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't even get to go to the funeral. Somebody should have told me. And they're so uncomfortable, and we, watching them, especially family members, become much, much more uncomfortable. And we're like squirming around trying to say something. And then the one few blessing that we have in this disease is they're easily distracted, so they get distracted away. We're still sitting there thinking, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And then they're likely to start all over and say something like, well, I can't eat dinner because I have to wait for Tom to come home. And, of course, Tom is their husband who has recently died. So once again, this falls under never argue, always agree. So what do you do when they say they're looking for somebody that's died? Now, you're not on the witness stand. This isn't the whole truth and nothing but the truth. But I want you to see how this fits. And it comes from the truth, because if you can practice the truth, then when they can read your body language, which they'll always be able to do way longer than they can do anything else, especially if they know you well, is say something like the truth. I haven't seen him today. So whether it's their mama who would be 110 now, or whether it's somebody that just died, or whether you don't know or not and you're just a caregiver that's looking out for them, you don't really have to have that much information. What you can say is, I haven't seen them today, because if they're dead or if you don't know who they are, that's the truth. And once again, you're getting in this together, and then you can do the best tool that comes in next that works best all the time: change the subject to a different subject as quickly as you can.
Yeah, I think sometimes families and even professional, care workers that are getting paid get so into the black and white. What's the honest to God truth? If someone is dead, and they can't lie and they're uncomfortable. But again, we're not being person centered when we're not taking into consideration how that answer is going to impact them. And to me, what you're talking about is really putting them first. And being as truthful as possible to keep their angst down, because what good's it really going to do?
Works.
Yeah,
it really works, and it's simple and it's easy. And does it work every time? Well, no, but I don't know anything in the whole world that works every time. So my answer to that is, how do you get good at something? Usually people will answer and say you practice. Well, if you're dealing with somebody that's having these difficulties and they're bringing up these subjects, you're going to get ample opportunity to practice. So if it didn't work the first time, use that blessing of forgetfulness and try it again. And pretty soon these things really will start working as you become more comfortable, because it's how they're reading your level of comfort that's going to make the biggest difference.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I love your philosophy, and I think it's easy it's easy to apply once we let go of trying to have to be in control and trying to be perfect and, bringing kind of our old world into theirs. It just doesn't work. We have to step into their new reality, accept that, appreciate that, and bring comfort to them. Because when they're comfortable, we're comfortable.
Exactly.
And that is something that I think so many of us forget. And we're the agitators, and we don't even realize that we're the ones, bringing it up to the next level because we're not working with them in terms of how they need to be in a relationship and the types of information that they need and why it's important. And, your 10 absolutes is it's so simply drawn out. And then, you've got the examples on the back side. I mean, and it's really easy to apply. And I think that's why it's shared constantly. I mean, I see it out quite often actually on the internet. People will cut and paste it and go, "This is the best thing I've ever found." They absolutely adore it and want to share it with others there. So, great.
Well, and thank you. And just a word about the 10 absolutes. So there's a little more information about it. Number one is that it turned 20 last month. So I copyrighted it if you see the copyright on there, it's 1996. I copyrighted in January of 1996, which means it's 20 years old. And you're right, it's been out there, and it's been out there without the copyright, and that's not okay because of copyright law. That's not okay. But I have always allowed people to use it as long as they put the copyright on it, which is just Huey 1996. If you look up Huey or 1996 or the 10 absolutes, which it says at the top, or even put in absolutely never, argue instead agree, anything off of it, it'll all pop up and comes right back to me. So it's easy to find me with that on our internet for people that use the internet. But I just want to talk about the fact that it's been around for 20 years, and people have told me over and over how useful it is. And so I really want it to be shared with people and hope that the people who are listening to this will have a way to print it out, or you can go to my website and print it out. And so those are ways that you can get this and share this. And of course, you have to maintain copyright law, but that's all you have to do. It doesn't cost you anything to share it. My book, Alzheimer's Disease, Help and Hope, was actually written on and about the 10 absolutes, and I used it for my master's thesis in college. And so it is published work, the effectiveness of training for Alzheimer's caregivers. So that's a little more history about the 10 absolutes. I told you how it got started, and then tell you a little bit more about how it's evolved. And the book 10 Alzheimer's Disease, Help and Hope, which is about the 10 absolutes, just turned 15 in November. So these things have been out there for a while, and they still stand the test of time. When I redid my 15th anniversary edition, I made very few changes. Mostly they were about myself, and I don't look like I looked, so I put a different picture and some things like that. But these stand the test of time, and I just want them to be available to people to use them however they can to make their lives easier. It's a tool to make life easier for caregivers, which makes life way easier for the person for whom they're providing care.
Yep, wonderful. Well, and even the way the book is written, I mean, it's very rare when someone actually puts a tool on the cover, and on the back cover, you actually have the basics of the 10 absolutes listed there, so people know right away what they're getting into, and it all is just so intriguing because it's like, oh my gosh, of course, this makes a lot of sense, and then you open it up. And read some of the situations and the examples and stuff, and it's just clearly written easy. It's a very easy read, and it's one of those, I think, where you can just kind of pick it up when you need to as a reference as well. So if you're really arguing with somebody, you can go back, okay, let me just go to that chapter here, never argue. and
see what I should really do here, because this is not working.
Yep. And, or never shame, and a lot of times we don't even know we're shaming people. You
we
know?
don't. And so, had I not copyrighted this so long ago, I would actually change that word to embarrass, because the thing that most people really are not aware of, and I do a whole series on brain biology by Jo, and I'm actually working on a little booklet for it, sort of like your book, that I just never seem to get wrapped up. And so anyway, what people really don't realize is that a person with Alzheimer's, which is also why they can read us so well and our buttons, and I actually learned this at a conference given by Nancy Mace in 1981, that they're not impaired. The part of their brain that is not impaired is the feeling part. Now, we think of feeling with heart, but of course it's not our pumping organ of blood where heart is, but so their feelings aren't impaired, and so the way that they see us and read us and everything, they're good readers of that, because when you don't know intellectually, for lack of a better word, what's going on, you let your intuition or your feelings or your sense about something or your vast experience that you have accumulated in that feeling aspect to figure out what's going on. And so that's why it's so easy for them to read us, but it's also why it's so easy for them to get their feelings hurt, get easily embarrassed, and we'll say things to them like, "What did you do that for?" And they truly don't remember what they just did, because that's the early impairment for everybody, regardless of what's causing those symptoms. So when they don't remember what they just did, they really don't remember. And then we're upset with them about something, and they realize that we're upset with them about something, so they figure they must have done it. But then we go right back to that circle, and they say, "Well, but I didn't do that. I would never do that." And then we come back and say, "Well, yes, you did. I just saw you." And so, see, you go right back around. So all of these 10 absolutes all come back to the first 3 or 4, and they just go round and round you go. So it doesn't have to be 10 things. 10 things just help you have a little outline that you can use. But if you can just shift, teeny tiny shifts, 1 or 2 ways that you manage something just in conversation, you can make a world of difference every day. It doesn't have to be so hard. Let's don't make it hard. Let's do a tiny shift, practice one little thing, see how it works, try it out, and our day will get better, and then their day gets better, and there you go. It's the spiral that goes upward instead of downward.
Well, today on Dementia Chats, we talked about kind of the dementia-friendly communities and the villages and stuff. And one of the things that was brought out was, it's nice that these physical changes are made, but we really need people to make psychological changes in terms of how they're communicating with us, emotional adjustments, spiritual adjustments to really bring us comfort. Because so many times, they get so tired of people looking at them and going, "Well, you look fine," and it's just, we've got to be deeper than that. We've got to, what I call consciously care. And I think that's what's so cool about your 10 absolutes is it helps people consciously shift in terms of how they are caring for one another. And, none of us like to argue. I shouldn't say none of us. Some people are on debate teams and, that's kind of their goal. But, for the most part, people, would rather sit and have fun and be engaged versus be in the thick of something that makes them, for many, very uncomfortable. And so, I think your 10 absolutes can really have a broader expansion than just dementia. That's just kind of my personal thought. It gets into, I think, respect for where a person is in life. And not that we don't want to teach people right from wrong if we're dealing with small children. But again, it's getting into how do you do that in a respectful fashion.
Right.
So it's not demeaning.
It is, and people tell me all the time, because of course I've given these presentations, and I have quite a few different presentations I do around the 10 episodes. People come up to me all the time and they say, this will work for 2-year-olds, teenagers, difficult bosses, all kinds of different things, if it happens to be like a general audience. And so So it really is a form of communication. And it's not so much about right and wrong as exactly what you said. It's about respect, and it's about dignity. And even small children, there's a way to teach them right and wrong that doesn't require yelling at them and belittling them and taking away, their self-esteem and their self-respect. And so it is an actual communication tool that can help us look at different ways of approaching many things in our life, especially when we're tired and frustrated and possibly even angry, because that's the kind of emotions that come out of life. And so it really does help keep you kind of on task and just stopping and thinking of how you might look at this and really thinking about what's really important anyway. Is it this one issue that we're going toe-to-toe on, or is it having a good day or a good time or a good visit or a good 15 minutes or getting something from bad to better? Again, all the way around, but particularly with this disease process that has a lot of loss and pain and things in it, if we can just make tiny little shifts, we can make each other smile, and that is a day or an hour changer on a regular basis.
Well, and I like that you said tiny shifts, because I think everybody thinks everything has to be this big, huge project, and it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of money and a lot of effort, and it really doesn't have to. I think, I've seen the biggest shifts in getting people to see the simplicity and getting them back into being, being relationship based.
Exactly.
And just, everybody wants that comfort. And sometimes the care partner's not willing to even say how uncomfortable they are, if they're angry or if they're exhausted or whatever, because they're embarrassed that they have those feelings, or and they don't want to disclose, they don't want to talk about it, because they, how are others going to look at them? And so part of it is, I think, for the care partners to really look at, okay, how are you feeling in all of this too? Let's get honest. And emotions aren't good or bad; they just are. It's just how we react to them that gets us in trouble. And so if we realize that, everybody on both sides of the slide here, have emotions, and they're going to trigger different things, and sometimes they're going to be the same, and that's okay. It's just, how do we get back to that peaceful place? Because I think that's where most people want to be.
Right. And that brings up another point, if I can interject
Sure.
here, that happens so often. I so often hear people, after they've seen my 10 Absolutes, after they've even read my book, after they've attended one of the presentations that I've done, and they will come up to me. So I'm just going to give an example. So it's the children that are here. It's their parents they're worried about. Their mom is so stressed out about their dad, or their dad's so stressed out about their mom, whichever direction that it's going. The care partner, and they're saying, but they just do everything wrong, and I need them to learn to do this. This is my advice to them, and I think it's very important to bring this up. The person that they need to change, which is not the one with the disease process, but the one that is a stressed out, worn out caregiver, needs the courtesy of these 10 absolutes. Mm-hmm. So I tell them, don't give this to your worn out care provider. Use this with them and stop arguing with them about arguing with the person.
Yep.
Use it that way. Use it with the person that is the most stressed out, and look at this from that perspective and see how you can use this tool to help yourself interact with the one that doesn't have the disease process. Because as the stressed out caregiver, that's another thing that happens so often, is everybody keeps asking you if you're taking care of yourself. And then they tell you everything that you're doing wrong or how you could be doing it better. And that is the last thing you need in the world as a care provider or a care partner or whatever you want to call it, as, just a spouse of someone that's ill. And so I really want to bring that around. Once again, use this tool not to teach someone else what to do, but to be kinder to someone else that maybe needs to know what to do. Example is a wonderful, wonderful tool.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention was a lot of times people will kind of push off making a change and going, hey, we're still good. Things aren't that bad yet. What do you say to those people?
I hear that all the time, and I've heard it so much through the years. So often people say that, and what I really say to them is, if you are concerned enough that you're thinking about going to the doctor to get a diagnosis, if you're way on down the road a ways and you've got the diagnosis, early on, absolutely early on, as soon as you think there's something wrong, you need to start finding resources, because you can't do this alone. There's a wonderful resource with the Alzheimer's Association, and you can go to the alz.org. I really don't work for them, but I've used their tools all through the years. And they have things that you can do to help a family with Alzheimer's disease. It's a little known. You have to ask for it. It isn't usually kept in any of the chapter offices. You have to ask for it. But it's a little card that you can get, and you can hand it out to people if they say, I wish there's something I could do to help. You don't have to tell them what they can do to help. You don't have to ask for help, because those are very hard things for us to do. And you think, well, I'm going to save that up for later. Well, if you're in the arena, if you're just entering, later is now. And so get that little card, and when somebody says something to you, you can hand it out to them. Or you can read that card sometimes, and it'll just help you think how wonderful it would be if somebody would just come and visit with your loved one for an hour, so that you could just go do something that didn't require doing anything, like maybe staring at the sunset.
Yep. Good advice. Another question that I want to ask is, a lot of times, and I think families really, really struggle with this, is, when do we tell our friends that dementia's knocked at our door? Because they really feel a need to protect, and they feel very disloyal and uncomfortable, and that they're really worried about the stigma, bottom line, of how people are going to react to this, and is this really disrespectful? What do you say to those folks struggling with that decision?
Well, I shared how much I learned about that. It was really a blessing for me when I finally had my mom diagnosed, and I didn't want my brother and sister or other children to read what was on there, because that even seemed disloyal. It's like, Mom and I are doing okay, kind of the first subject going to the next one, and we're going to be okay, but I don't want people to think that there's something really wrong with her, because once again, that stigma became so aware to me. And so you know what? Think about it like you do any other disease process. And so you'll be surprised at how often we notice, and sometimes we need other people to notice so that we can get some help or some assistance or maybe even sympathy. But, people really don't pay that much attention, and they really don't notice that there's that much wrong. And so it's not that important to tell people unless it's something that's affecting them. Usually, if somebody doesn't ask, don't tell. If they ask you, I've noticed that something's going on, for sure, ever, don't talk about them in front of them like they're not even there. Say, well, why don't we have a chat someday, or why don't I give you a call at a convenient time? And then ask them what they've seen. Gather information from them, and less is usually better. Tell them, there are some challenges going on, and we're not really sure what it is, and we're working with the doctor, and you don't have to get into all the details. The majority of my family, most of the family on both my mom's side and my dad's side, and my dad had died almost 20 years before my mom even became ill. Not hardly anyone really knew that there was anything wrong with my mom. She had beautiful social skills, beautiful manners, and she could just pop into that so quickly. And as long as they're not providing the care and it's just an acquaintance, you can help them out by, instead of saying, do you know who this is? You say, oh, Mom, this is Aunt Lucille, and she came here to see us, to talk about Dad. She and Dad were little together and in high school together, and you can just fill in that stuff, and people are like, yeah, and you can get by. So it's really the comfort level that you're at to discuss with people and the need to know, and often there isn't that much need to know. People that you really need in your life that seem to be going away because they don't know what to do and they're pulling away, have a nice conversation with them. But you don't have to go out there. When you have cancer or something like that, we're pretty selective about the details that we tell people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The one thing I guess I would add to that, though, is be honest with what your feelings are as a care partner. I mean, I know for me, I used to get really mad at my folks' friends because I'm like, why are they inviting them to do this? Why are they doing this? And then I would have to undo it because they weren't capable of doing certain things. And it was because we never had an honest conversation. And so it caused a lot of frustration for myself, but also my folks too.
And that's an excellent point. And thank you so much for bringing that up. So it really does, but it's also something that you can say with illnesses. Mom really hasn't been feeling well for a while, and so we try not to have those. We try not to get into those kinds of situations. Mm-hmm. And if you'd like me to explain more about that to you, I will at a later time, but you can also just learn to not include some of those things, even family meals at holiday time and things like that. You just start being selective about what you're doing, which you wouldn't even sort of stop at doing it if somebody was on chemo or something like that. You can say, well, they're really not feeling well. And then if they ask and want to know the details and they genuinely want to know and you can really get help from them, then give them the details. But a lot of times people just don't understand what it is, and you're back in that quandary about the stigma and everything. So the people that are close and the people that matter are the ones that you really work with. And otherwise, you just say, Mom's been under the weather for a few months and we're trying to work this out. So we're going to have to decline right now.
Mm-hmm. I have a question I just want to pose to you, because I think there are some people with the disease who are very much advocates for the disease that would argue the point that they want to kind of come out of the closet, and not everybody does about the disease, but I think many of them feel strongly that, we need to be honest with people if we're going to get if we're really going to become dementia friendly. Just kind of like cancer, way back when it was just referred to as the C word. And, mm-hmm. and now people are really embracing it. They're doing the walks, they're doing, all kinds of things. And I know that there's, a lot of people out there, not everybody, but a lot of people out there that say, we need to start being honest. But again, it gets into, I think, individual circumstances and what the person diagnosed, as well as the family, what their comfort levels are.
And I think the people that are out there, being diagnosed early, thank heavens that we're doing a better and better job. And I can't encourage that more than being diagnosed early. And those people are the real advocates that are out there, and they can advocate for themselves. And that is wonderful, and it's such a blessing. And they are the leaders. Let's ask them, and let's do what they say. And that's really not only okay, but, full steam ahead, because it will help us learn more about this disease, and it will help us in the long run become advocates and make it more normal. But the problem with it is trying to get it with people, particularly in an older generation. Mm-hmm. So they don't want to know. They don't want other people to know. So absolutely go to the individuality. But the people that are getting early diagnosis, the early onset people, so Early onset means under the age of 65. Early diagnosis means you're diagnosed early enough in the disease process to be your own advocate, to still make some decisions, to still be active in your own care. And we never even used to be concerned about that. They're making such wonderful things. They're such wonderful people, and they're writing books, and they're testifying in front of Congress and all of those things. And that is just absolutely amazing and wonderful, and I totally encourage that. But the question that I was answering more was like when I was dealing with my mom, and when people are dealing with people, or they're saying to them, now you've got to understand you've got Alzheimer's and you can't drive anymore. So again, it's back to using those subtle shifts and really looking at each person as an individual. Let's please, please, please not forget to look at each person as an individual. One individual with Alzheimer's is one individual with Alzheimer's. You can't lump them all in together with generalities. So look at each person, look at each situation, and look at what you're able to be comfortable with. And if you're not comfortable with what they're comfortable with, you may have to remove yourself from that particular position, or you may have to remove yourself from whom, where they're interacting. You might not be the right person to be their advocate if they want to really talk about it and you really don't. And you have to come back to, is this about them or is this about you? And that's something I think you have to redo over and over, and we're getting so much better at it, and that's just so wonderful that we are, especially early diagnosis people that can advocate for themselves. I mean, let's cheer them on and help them however they want to be helped.
Yeah. Well, and I love that you said analyze, who is this really about? Why is this decision being made? Is it about you and your comfort level? And you worried about being embarrassed, or is it really about the person that you're caring for? And there's a big difference there sometimes. And
there's a huge difference. My book, Don't Leave Mama Home with the Dog, I talk about that all the time, how often it was about me and not about her when I was taking care of my mom. My son, I heard him explain this one day, and I had no idea why until he said it, and he's a very adult son. He's too old to be my son. I don't know how that happened. But anyway, he said to somebody, he said, yeah, Don't Leave Mama Home with the Dog is a real catchy title, which my mom participated in creating that title, which is what made it so fun and so catchy. But he said, it's really my mom's memoirs about she and my grandma's journey with her symptoms of dementia that were caused, vascular, not Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
So I talk about that a lot, and how I had to review who this was about, and very often it was about me. And so I kind of, I kind of beat myself up in there a little bit, but it was to help emphasize going back and forth and looking at that very point, because I had to do that really often in Mom's care.
Okay. Well, I could just talk with you all day. I love your philosophy. You're just so easy to listen to. You, drop just these little mini nuggets all over the place. And, check out Jo Huey's books, Alzheimer's Disease, The 10 Simple Solutions for Caregivers, and also Alzheimer's Disease, Help and Hope, and Don't Leave Mama Home with the Dog. And I just want to highlight, if it's okay, really quickly, your 10 absolutes, so that they can know what they're getting. Instead of argue, agree. Instead of trying to reason with them, divert. Instead of shaming, distract. Instead of lecturing, reassure. Instead of saying remember, reminisce. Instead of saying I told you, go ahead and repeat and regroup. Many times we say you can't. Instead, do what they can do. And instead of commanding or demanding, use a model that's asking and engaging. Instead of being condescending, be encouraging and praise. And instead of forcing an issue, reinforce. Again, you're just brilliant, and you communicate in such a simple way that you're going to be able to help. You already have helped, I'm sure hundreds of thousands of people around the world. And, your 10 Absolutes celebrating 20 years shows the pertinence and the value of what you've learned and what you are sharing with the world is still very helpful for those going through this journey. So thank you so much, Jo. What are the best contacts for people to get a hold of you?
Probably the best one is to just Google me, if you can do that. So you just put in those 6 easy letters, JOHUEY, and then my website comes up. You can always email me for free, and I'll respond, jo@alzheimersadvocate.com. My website is alzheimersadvocate.com, but sometimes that's a lot to try to remember. And then, of course, the website itself is www.alzheimersadvocate.com. But again, the easiest way is if you do Jo Huey and email me, ask me questions. I'll send you copies of the 10 Absolutes. And that all is for free. And then, there are books and other things that show up on the website, and you can look at those and use them however it'll be helpful for you and your loved ones.
Great. And when people share your 10 Absolutes, please be courteous and respectful of her trademark. You're not going to take anything away from the material by leaving her name on there, her contact information. It's just going to help more people reach out and find similar tips and tools and resources, when they need it. So, again, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. It really was an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show today, Jo.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity. And everyone, be kind to yourself and look at the joy that you can still have in life regardless of what's happening to us. Thank you.
Thank you. And remember, you can go to audibletrial.com/social and get your 330-day trial of over 180 titles. Again, that's www.audibletrial.com/social. Also, on Alive and Social here, our network, you can check out Apples to Apples Monday at 2:30, or go to the archives and listen to Scott and Drew Applebaum, who are a father and son team who discuss sports, and find out if father really knows best. Another show I want to highlight is just Joan of Arc, which is a weekly podcast, and Joan investigates and celebrates people who make art. And so join the conversation and check her out. She uploads new episodes every Monday. For our last couple of shows, we talked about delirium, what it is. And we also had calendar cards on, which is a new memory support system. And if you haven't listened to those shows, I would encourage you to do so. This week, we're actually going to be doing 3 shows. This one here today. On Thursday, we're going to be talking with Mark Arnold, the CEO of the Caregiver Alert Center, which helps find missing people. And on Friday, we're going to be talking with the executive director of Caring Together in Hope, who just opened a memory care cafe, which is open 6 days a week, all year long in Georgia. And then on the 15th, we're going to be talking to Dan Hansen about funeral options. And it's not going to be what you think it is. So you're definitely going to want to listen in. Tomorrow, I will be posting the Dementia Chats webinar we did today. Again, we talked about dementia-friendly communities versus dementia-friendly villages. What's the difference? How can we work together better in the future? And that will be a free video anybody can look at. If you're going to be in Texas in April, let me know, because I'm going to be down there a couple of times. On the 28th, I'm going to be doing a caregiver survival camp down in Tyler, Texas, with the Alzheimer's Alliance of Smith County. And then in the beginning of the month, I'll be working with Autumn Leaves, and we're going to be doing some previews of His Neighbor Phil. Let's see, what else do I want to do a shout out? On the blogs, there's a couple of great articles I think you'll be interested in. On the 6th, we had an article about a gal who is a wonderful athlete who has decided to donate her brain to science. There's also a blog that highlights 2 new songs about the loss in dementia. One is called Not Alone, and the other one is Disappeared. and then information on the semi-postal stamp for Alzheimer's, how you can get involved with that. And let's see, what else can I tell you? Last thing, I think before closing up, again, I want to give a shout out to FreshBooks. You can grab your 30-day your 30-day free trial by going to gofreshbooks.com/alive. That's it for the show today. Keep in mind your memory chip, which you can download from alzheimersspeaks.com by going to our tools and products area, which teaches you to focus on, instead of your task list, focus on really being truly person-centered. Are they safe? Are they happy? Are they pain-free? Take care now.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey everybody, Jared Sylvester here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.